Welcome. I'm Bill Cosby, and this is Program 1 of the Time Life Video Reading Efficiency System. I'm here to help you read better, to get more meaning from what you read in less time. I know you can already read. Probably you could read anything if you had enough time. Most any kind of reading is easy if you have the time. But you want to read better and spend less time doing it. Reading is more than just eyeballing a page without moving your lips. Reading is getting meaning from printed words regardless of whether the words are in a contract or on a credit card statement. Reading involves thinking and reasoning, both before you start and while you're doing it. Different kinds of text require different kinds of thinking, speed, and technique. The experts who helped put these programs together agree that in order to read more efficiently, you have to improve your comprehension, build your vocabulary, and increase your reading rate. The skills and exercises you'll be using here, in fact everything in this course, will show you the most efficient ways to accomplish these three things. Understanding the meaning of paragraphs is the key to efficient reading. If you can understand the meaning of a paragraph, you can understand the whole book, because the book is nothing but paragraphs, one after the other. A paragraph is a group of sentences which contain information about a general topic. Together, the sentences build up to the main idea of the paragraph. In this program, you'll see how to find the main idea of a paragraph. Let's start with a paragraph about epic movies. Okay. Here's one. Hollywood was still very young when it realized that history and classic literature were made to order for the screen. The Bible alone was the source of enough raw material for the whole industry. Usually, the main idea is expressed in one of the sentences in the paragraph, or in a part of the sentence. This sentence is called the topic sentence. It expresses the most important idea, the main idea of the paragraph. What's the most important idea of this paragraph? History and classic literature were made to order for the screen. Right. The most important idea of the paragraph is that history and classic literature are good subjects for movies. So the first sentence in this paragraph is the topic sentence, and the topic sentence expresses the main idea. The other sentence in the paragraph, the one about the Bible, supports the main idea. Sometimes, as in the movie example, one sentence in the paragraph tells you the main idea. The other sentences also say something about the same subject topic, but they aren't as important. It's the main idea that the author wants you to remember most. Now, find the main idea in this paragraph. Pizza parlors are small shops where mom and pop make your order while you wait. But pizza is big business. Quaker Oats, Pillsbury, and General Mills and other companies make frozen pizza and own their own pizza parlors. The general topic is pizza making. But what's the idea the writer wanted to get across? What's the main idea? Pizza is big business. Exactly. The topic sentence, pizza is big business, is the main idea. Frequently, a writer will put the main idea in the first sentence, but the main idea could appear anywhere in the paragraph, in the middle or at the end. Take a look at the following short paragraphs and locate the main idea. It won't always be in the same place. You'll have a chance to look for yourself before the right answer pops up in living color. Now, the first one's about the early days of rock and roll. Entrepreneurs found ways to make hefty middleman's profits from rock and roll. The most visible of these middlemen were the disc jockeys. A well-scrubbed square named Dick Clark was their undisputed king. He was master of ceremonies for an afternoon TV show called American Bandstand. Okay, where's the main idea? Beginning, middle, or end? A well-scrubbed square named Dick Clark was their undisputed king. Near the end, right? The main idea of the paragraph is that Dick Clark made more money than any other disc jockey. Now try this one. The invention of writing took place around 3000 BC, first in Mesopotamia, and shortly afterward in Egypt. Egypt probably acted under the spur of Mesopotamia's example. Okay, where's the main idea, at the beginning or the end? The invention of writing took place first in Mesopotamia and shortly afterwards in Egypt. Right at the beginning this time. Now, do one more. This time, you should know beforehand that it's a true story about a major league pitcher who also has a medical degree and has taught his teammates how to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and heart massage. You know when you blow air in somebody's mouth and get them breathing and you beat on their chest to get their heart beating. Now apparently one teammate, the catcher, wasn't paying very close attention in the course, as everyone found out when the team was on a commercial flight to its next game. What happened next? Read the next paragraph. Find the main idea. I'll give you a hint. It's not at the beginning, okay? Here's the paragraph. The plane encountered some severe weather, scaring some of the passengers. "Don't worry about a thing, folks," the catcher announced. "We're trained to help. If anything happens, we'll beat on your lips and blow on your chest." The pitcher later revealed that the catcher had flunked the course. Remember, the main idea is the most important one in the paragraph. The pitcher later revealed that the catcher had flunked the course. This time, the main idea is at the end. It's the payoff to the story. If you knew the catcher had flunked the course up front, you wouldn't have smiled at the end, if you smiled at all. The main idea of a paragraph can appear anywhere, and the main idea can appear nowhere, too. There are paragraphs in which no main idea is directly stated in any of the sentences, and yet the paragraph seems to have a main idea. Take a look at this. With no supplies or ammunition, the Soviet troops defended the city by ripping up the top floors of buildings and tossing them down on the Germans. One signal corpsman kept communications going even in death by clenching the ends of two severed telephone wires together in his teeth. The writer is telling you something more than the events of a battle. This is no ordinary battle, and these are no ordinary soldiers. There isn't a direct statement of the main idea in the paragraph, but the fact that the soldiers fought with chunks of concrete when they ran out of ammo and the signal corpsman acted so bravely suggests a main idea, namely that Soviet soldiers were courageously stubborn or that they were desperately courageous. Okay, implied main ideas. You have to look harder for them. Think more before you're sure what the writer means. Finding the implied main idea takes practice. Now, the best way to get the most out of your effort is to practice regularly on the reading you do away from here. Read for longer periods of time than you used to, at least 3 hours a week more, and read longer pieces. The next time you pick up a paper, just don't read the headlines and the first couple of paragraphs before you go to your horoscope or the sports page. Read the whole thing and use the skills you've learned in this program. Then go to your horoscope. In the first comprehension program, you saw that the main idea was often found in one sentence somewhere in the paragraph. Now, in this program, you'll find out why the rest of the sentences are there. The writer adds facts and details, descriptions and clarifications to support the main idea. The more important the writer thinks the main idea is, the more extra information he sticks in. Now, some of this additional information can be more important than the rest of it. You take a look at this paragraph. The Postmaster General ordered all mail planes to be equipped with radio sets. Pilots can converse with land stations, get their bearings, find out the weather ahead of them, and summon help. Tests show the equipment will work even when saturated with rain or snow. Pick out the main idea first. The Postmaster General ordered all mail planes equipped with radio sets. That's it. The rest of the sentences in the paragraph contain facts and details which help to develop the main idea. Now, some of the facts and details have an important or major relationship to the main idea. Others have a less important or minor relationship. The fact that pilots can converse with land stations, get their bearings, find out the weather ahead of them, and summon help explains why the radios were ordered in the first place. This is a major detail, an important one. It adds substantially to our understanding of the main idea. The fact that radios will work in bad weather is not terribly important to the main message. It's really just an extra piece of information, a minor detail. The paragraph comes from an article that was written in 1923, when many planes had open cockpits. Maybe back then the same detail would have seemed more interesting, but it's not essential to understanding the main idea. To understand a writer's message, you should separate the major facts and details from the minor ones. Remember that major details often provide essential information about the main idea, and minor details can make the paragraph more interesting, but they aren't essential to the understanding of the main idea. Now, here's another passage. It contains a main idea, major details, and minor ones for you to find. German tanks rumbled over the bridges and immediately began cutting up the French army. The French counterattacks were late and badly coordinated. The French tanks were slower than the Germans. Their fuel range was shorter, and they lacked radio communication. More than 50 of them were destroyed in a couple of hours. I'd say the main idea is that the Germans clobbered the French. Once you know that, you can look for the major and minor details. Take a look at the paragraph again and find some details which add important information, some major details. An important detail in this paragraph would be one which says just how badly the French got beaten. More than 50 of them were destroyed in a couple of hours. 50? Wow, that's a lot of tanks. How come so many? The French counterattacks were late and badly coordinated. Maybe if the French had started earlier and were better organized, they would have had a better chance. It's an important detail, one you wouldn't want to forget if you were a tank commander. An important detail is a major one which supports the main idea and explains it. A minor detail doesn't help as much, but it can be interesting. Take one more look at the paragraph for minor details. There's a minor detail right there. The French tanks were slower than the Germans, their fuel range was shorter, and they lacked radio communication. A tank commander would tell you that a slower tank with less fuel and no radio doesn't always lose a battle. And he might even have one or two other minor details to tell you about slow tanks. He might have several minor details. But the point is, they're minor. The minor details here add a little more interest to the main idea of the Germans clobbering the French. Finding the major and minor details is a personal job, a subjective one. What the tank commander thinks is a major detail, you might think is a minor one. To a point, it depends on your own interpretation. But sometimes the writer isn't satisfied with telling you about just one important idea. He wants to tell you about another idea which is similar to the main idea, but it doesn't really state the writer's message the way the main idea does. These similar ideas are called subordinate ideas. Subordinate ideas are like major details. They help you understand the main idea, but they work in a different way, one you can't recognize by reading a single paragraph. Subordinate ideas support the main idea by providing good examples, explanations, and reasons to support it. Now, here's a story with a good main idea right up front. Now, listen to this and find the main idea. The West was full of promise for women. To succeed, they had to fight off Indian raids, starvation, and the aching sense of loneliness in an empty land. That's a great main idea, right up front. The West was full of promise for women. And the other sentence in the paragraph, the one about how hard life was, told you that promise would not be easily fulfilled. It was a good major detail. And the next paragraph of the story is a good example of a subordinate idea, one which supports the main idea with examples. Take a look at it. Some women were not satisfied just to be the missus. Thousands worked their own land. Thousands had men's jobs. They even demanded the right to vote and shocked the East when they won that right in 4 Western states by 1900. The whole paragraph is a subordinate idea which supports the main idea of the West being full of promise for women. And like any good subordinate idea, this one clarifies the nature of the promise, explains it, and gives good examples of it. Take a look at the paragraph again. A good example of the promise the West held for women was this one. Thousands worked their own land. Back East, very few women owned any. Here's another good reason the West held promise. Thousands had men's jobs. They didn't get the same pay, but they did have them. And here's the best one of all. They even demanded the right to vote and won that right in 4 Western states by 1900. Now, reading this, you can see that the writer used the subordinate ideas to drive home the main idea. Subordinate ideas do this by making the main idea clearer in the reader's mind by illustrating it. Subordinate ideas also keep you focused on the main idea. If you understand the supporting ideas, then the main idea, promise of the West, has extra meaning for you. You know exactly what kind of promise was kept. There's another technique you can use to understand your reading better if you have a sharp eye. Often a writer will use certain words to direct your thoughts as you read. Now, these words act the way traffic signals do, directing you as you read. So they're called signal words or directional words. They both do the same thing. They tell you how to understand the relationship among the writer's ideas and the details which support these ideas. Directional words are like symphony conductors. They tell you which speed your brain should play at to keep the music of the words sweet and clear. Here's a good example of directional words in action. Furthermore, Hitler had to use most of his forces to invade Poland. The pact with Russia guaranteed they would not attack, but Poland's Western allies would, if most of the German army were in Poland. Only limited forces could protect the Western front. Thus, it was a big gamble. Directional words tell you which way the words and ideas are flowing. Furthermore, and thus, give you mental signals to continue to proceed, but suggest that you should change directions. If and only indicate that you should slow down and read carefully. Now, if you know what techniques the writer is using, if you're familiar with them and recognize them at work, then you'll understand your reading as well as the person who wrote it. Hello there. Now, this program is about the relationship of ideas in your reading. The more you understand how these relationships work, the easier it is to understand a writer's message. One of these relationships is cause and effect. Now, let's take a look at an example. Hey, close the door, will you? Okay, that wasn't the example that I had in mind, but you get the idea. You see, the cause of this major catastrophe was the wind, and the effect of opening the door was a lot of work for nothing. Do you see what I mean? There's a relationship between the ideas of cause and effect. You find cause and effect in reading all the time if you look for it. In single sentences, for example. The amendment, if passed, would completely phase out mandatory retirement over a 5-year period. Okay, what would be the effect if the amendment were passed? Right, the end of mandatory retirement. And what's the cause of the end of mandatory retirement? The amendment. Regardless of how you organize the words, the two ideas are related. The way the sentence reads now, the cause comes before the effect. But you can switch it around so the effect comes first, but it still means the same thing. Mandatory retirement would be phased out over a 5-year period if the amendment is passed. Cause and effect shows you the direct relationship between ideas, but you have to look carefully at the words to be sure which is the cause and which is the effect. A cause is a reason for something, the wind, or an amendment, for example. The effect is the result, cards all over the floor, or the phasing out of mandatory retirement. Cause and effect are at work in paragraphs as well as single sentences. But a writer doesn't always tell you this is a cause and this is an effect. You may not always get a full picture of both sides of the relationship. The writer may be interested in explaining or describing conditions and events that cause a certain situation without really treating the effects. A report about the cause of inflation, for example, doesn't have to describe in detail the effects of higher prices and higher interest rates. On the other hand, a writer might decide to write about the effects rather than the causes. A film reviewer, for instance, might describe the effect a new mystery had on her. She'd tell you how one scene made her hair stand on end or how the end of the movie made her heart stop. But she wouldn't describe the cause of her fright, because if she did, she'd give away the plot. Another thing about cause and effect, sometimes one cause can have several effects. Take a look at this paragraph. His heart raced and pounded. His blood pressure soared. A flood of hormones excited some of his organs and depressed others. His breathing quickened and his muscles tensed. This is how his body reacted to stress. Wonder what he was doing anyway. In any event, look for the causes and the effects. Thanks to the miracles of television, there's an easy way to determine which are which. Aha, there's one cause, stress of some kind, but there are many effects. It's hard to read about all the changes taking place in his body without wondering what's causing them. So when you get to the line that says, this is how his body reacted to, you know the writer is about to tell you the cause, stress. Now, using cause and effect relationships can help you understand main and supporting ideas. The main idea of the last paragraph was that stress causes changes in the function of your body. The supporting ideas explain the effects stress has. So, one cause can have several effects. The opposite is true too. One effect can have several causes. Here's a good example. In the next 3 decades, the U.S. became a nation dominated by its cities. Most of the new urban dwellers were farmers who had tired of working in the dirt. In the city, they were joined by millions of immigrants, lured by the hope of finding America's streets paved with gold. In this case, the writer is trying to emphasize the causes rather than the effects, as you will see in a second. Now, in this paragraph, there are 2 causes and 1 effect. People tired of farm work and immigrants hoping for a new life moved to the cities, which caused a population explosion. Another way you can improve your understanding of what you read is by looking for similarities and differences among ideas. To show you how 2 subjects or ideas are alike, a writer may compare them. By comparing them, the writer clarifies the main idea. Or instead of comparing ideas, the writer may contrast them to show how they are different. And to make a main idea extremely clear, he may compare and contrast several ideas to show both how they are alike and how they are different. And see what you can find that compares or contrasts in this paragraph. The long rifle could plug a coin at 50 yards and kill a man at 200. Even at 400 yards, General George Washington once noted a rifleman could hit an 8 by 10-inch sheet of paper 3 shots out of 5. By comparison, a man with a musket could send a ball only 150 yards and could not be sure of scoring after the first 50. In this paragraph, the words "by comparison" are a dead giveaway. The long rifle is being compared to the musket to clarify the main idea, which is that the long rifle was accurate, more accurate than a musket. Now, one hint about looking for comparisons and contrasts: always look to see which ideas share something in common before you try to figure out how they compare or contrast with other ideas in the same passage. Think of yourself as a good politician running for office as you read. Don't make up your mind until you've heard everything everyone has to say about the main idea. But then again, don't be too good a politician or you'll never give a straight answer. Sequencing is one more way a writer uses to show you the relationships among ideas. It's the order in which actions, events, and thoughts occur, or the order in which they relate to each other. Sequencing gives a sense of order or pattern to the sentences in a paragraph. If you are familiar with the pattern, you'll understand the ideas you're reading more easily. There are lots of ways to sequence ideas. Time sequencing is one way. The ideas follow each other in a paragraph the way they occur in time. Here's an example of time sequencing. Even before their hold on Mexico was secure, the Spaniards founded the first settlements west of the Mississippi, beginning with Santa Fe in 1610. Then came Tucson around 1700, Albuquerque in 1706, San Antonio in 1718, and San Diego in 1769. You can see how each settlement followed the other, like a pile of dominoes. Time sequencing helped you understand how Spanish colonization, the main idea of the paragraph, progressed. These are just a few examples in which a time sequence is important. Here's a quick review of the ideas you've covered so far in these 3 programs about comprehension improvement. Think of reading as a 3-step process. Step 1 is finding the main idea. Step 2, finding the major and minor details and the subordinate ideas. Step 3, you've covered in this program. Look for cause and effect, comparison and contrast and sequencing. You may find more than one of them at work at the same time. There's more to reading efficiency than knowing these 3 steps. You have to practice them often. In this program, you're going to learn about love, sex, and power. You'll find out how the ancient Greeks and Romans figured in television, microscopes, and Minneapolis. You'll uncover the inside scoop when tonsillitis meets a tonsillectomy, because this program is about roots. Not cultural ones, etymological ones, word roots. You're going to learn how to increase your vocabulary efficiently by using Latin and Greek roots. There are other ways to build your vocabulary. Memorization, for example. The trouble is, it's hard to learn words that way, and it's even harder to remember them. Learning roots is a better way. If you can figure out what a word is made of, sometimes you can figure out what it means. When a mechanic studies gasoline engines, he doesn't have to learn every gasoline engine, because once he understands the parts, he can pretty well figure out any engine. Carburetor does this, spark plug does that, crankshaft pushes piston up, valve lifter pushes valve down. It's the same with words. Many of them are made up of interchangeable parts. And if you can learn the meaning of one part, one root, you can plug it into other words and understand them too. It's a very efficient way to build your vocabulary. The English language has thousands of words that are made up from words or parts of words taken from other languages, from Greek, for instance, and Latin. 60% of all English words come from Latin and Greek roots. But who's counting? If you learn some of these roots, you can use them to understand hundreds of English words, especially technological words. Take television, for example. The word television has a Greek root. Tele is the Greek root, which means distant. Vision, you already know. Put them together, you have distant vision, television. The phone in telephone comes from the Greek root meaning sound. Telephone is distant sound. And the graph in telegraph comes from the Greek root for writing, distant writing. And once you know the meaning of the Greek root tele, you can take a shot at figuring out words like mental telepathy. It's mental, distant, something. Pathy is a Greek root too. It means feeling. And you put them together, you have a definition. Mental telepathy is distant feeling by way of your mind. You see pathy all the time in hospitals and doctors' offices, usually combined with other Greek roots like osteo, the Greek root for bone, osteopathy. The treatment of your bones and muscles is bone feeling. In fact, you've got Latin and Greek roots all over your body. Caput is the Latin word for head. And if yours comes off, you're caput. Capital punishment has the same effect. Manus, the Latin word for hand, is at the root of manipulation, which is skillful handling. Manacles, which handcuff crooks, and manager, who handles people and problems. The following passage will show you just how helpful a knowledge of the Latin root manus can be. In spite of the manager's manipulations, the superstar refused to obey curfew, so the next night the manager manacled him to the bedpost. There was a lot of clever handling in that. When you learn a new root, it's a good idea to put it to use in a sentence right away. It's easier to remember that way. Latin and Greek are at the root of sex, too. Gyneco is the Greek root for female, hence the words gynecology and gynecologist. Andros is the Greek root for male, so you should be able to figure out the meaning of androgyny, not by the way it sounds, but by the way it looks, by looking at the roots which make up the word. Androgyny means exactly what it says, male and female, all at the same time. Gynoandromorph is a shape which is both feminine and masculine at the same time. Morph is a Greek root meaning shape or form. Anthropos is the Greek root for mankind. So an anthropomorph is a human shape. Using the word in a sentence will make it clearer. Sometimes driftwood has an anthropomorphic shape. Once you know the meaning of the root anthro, you can take a good guess at the meaning of anthropology and anthropoid. Anthropology is the study of mankind. Anthropoids are human-like creatures. Gorillas, apes, and chimpanzees are anthropoids. And anthropologists study anthropoids in out-of-the-way places. Then there's the word philanthropy. Now, you know it has something to do with mankind because of the anthro root. And if you investigate the meaning of phil or phile in your dictionary, you'll see it's another Greek root, meaning love or loving or friendly. So put them together and philanthropy becomes the love of mankind, which is what a philanthropist expresses by giving money away to charities and institutions which help people. And when you know the meaning of the root phil, the meaning of sentences like the following one becomes clear very quickly. The philanthropist went to the Philharmonic with Philip, who was a real philosopher from Philadelphia. There's a lot of love in that sentence, so let me tell you. Love of mankind, love of music, love of knowledge, and the city of brotherly love. Prefixes go at the beginning of words. Pre is Latin for before or going before. Fix, you know. So a prefix is literally something which is fixed in front of or before something else. The prefix pre comes before all kinds of words. These words, for example. Stick the prefix pre in front of arrange, and you get prearrange, something set up beforehand. Third base coaches give runners prearranged signals to steal. Precaution is what you take beforehand to avoid problems afterwards. Preconceived notions are ideas which you have made up your mind about beforehand. As in the sentence, she had the preconceived notion that if she did a good job, she would get a raise. Prefabricated is made in advance. You can prefabricate houses or excuses. And predisposed means to tend to do beforehand, as in the sentence, he was predisposed to like her because of her beautiful black hair. Lots of words start with pre. Precede, preclude, precocious, and predict are just a few. And you can tell a whole story using them. The precaution printed on the prefabricated wall made him predisposed to predict that it would not stand for long. He was a precocious boy. Another common Latin prefix is post, which means just the opposite of pre. A postscript is something you write on a letter after you've signed it. That's where P.S. I love you comes from. Pone means place or put, so postponed on account of rain means to put the start of play after the rain stops. Humus is earth, so posthumous means literally after the earth. You are posthumous after you are in the ground. Your posterior comes after you. It's what you're sitting on right now. And put all these words together in a sentence and you've got another story, a real whodunit. The postscript to the posthumously received postcard indicated that the postmortem should not be postponed, contrary to the wishes of the butler. So far, you've been learning about Latin prefixes, but the Greeks have given a lot of prefixes too. Auto, for example. Auto means self, and it gives you many words. Most of them are very familiar. An automobile is self-moving, an autobiography is self-written, an autograph is one you sign yourself. And automation enables machines to run by themselves automatically. Here's a pair of Greek prefixes. You see them all the time. Hypo means under, hyper means over. So, hypodermic needle goes under the skin. Dermis is the Greek word for skin. Thesis means placing something under, so hypothesis is something placed under an underlying theory, and the hypothalamus is a part of the brain which lies under the thalamus gland, another part. Now, take a look at the opposite of hypo. Hyper means over, above, excessive. So, hypercritical means extra critical. As in the sentence, his mother is hypercritical of his girlfriend. Hypersensitive people are extraordinarily sensitive, usually to criticism, but it could be cold or pain. Hypertension is extra high blood pressure. Many people can tell you about that. So far, you've seen Latin prefixes, which mean one thing, and Greek prefixes, which mean another. But there are some Greek and Latin prefixes that mean the same thing. Poly and multi, for example, they're Greek and Latin prefixes for many. So, polychromatic and multicolored mean the same thing, having many colors. Chromos is Greek for color. Polygamous means having many spouses, particularly wives, and to be polygamous successfully, A husband should be multifaceted, which means possessing many talents. A polysyllabic word is one with many syllables. Multitudinous is a polysyllabic word. It means forming a great number. Let's look at the word parts you tack on to the end of a word to change its meaning, the suffixes. You don't realize how many words use suffixes until you start looking at them carefully. When oid is added to a word, it means like or resembling. So a humanoid is something which is like a human, but it's not a human. It resembles one, somebody from outer space maybe. An android, for example. An android is manlike. Here's a very common Greek suffix. Medical terms use it all the time. Itis means inflammation. So you get tonsillitis, laryngitis, arthritis, that's inflammation of your arthros, your joints, appendicitis, and bronchitis. Sometimes the best cure for itis of any kind involves another Greek suffix, a tomi. Tomi comes from the Greek root meaning to cut, slice, or divide. The best cure for tonsillitis is a tonsillectomy, cutting or slicing away the tonsils. So, when appendicitis threatens, you may need an appendectomy. Have the little devil out. But when a dichotomy looms on your horizon, don't call a doctor, call a referee. Dicho is a Greek word meaning in two parts. A dichotomy is a cutting or splitting in two parts, a difference of opinion. When two surgeons disagree on whether they should perform an appendectomy, a tonsillectomy, they have a dichotomy. The patient probably has a heart attack. Here are two words for you to define: polyphony and phylogeny. They sound a little different than they look, but both of them use roots, prefixes, and suffixes you've used earlier. Take them in order, break it down, find the prefix and the root. You know, poly is a Greek prefix which means many. Phony comes from the Greek root for sound, many sounds. Polyphony is something you do with many sounds. So which of the following is the best definition for polyphony? 1, a fear of loud noises. 2, music consisting of many voices or sounds. 3, the art of saying one thing many different ways. Right, polyphony is many sounds. Music consisting of many voices or sounds. What I've tried to give you here is a sense of how much the English language depends on other languages, especially Latin and Greek. And you may have noticed how the meanings of words have changed in the course of history. Writers have many ways of giving you hints or clues about the meaning of words. They want you to understand what they're saying. They want to get through to you, so sometimes they say the same thing in two slightly different ways. Here's an example. At first, Detective Kelly thought Barbara was culpable, but after questioning her for an hour, he finally decided she was not to blame for the murder. Not this one, anyway. Culpable is the word you're after. The writer tells you what it means at the end of the sentence. How do you know? Because at first, Kelly thought she was culpable. But finally, he decided she was not to blame. Here's another one. He hadn't planned to bump into her at the bus stop. It was a purely fortuitous meeting, but that pleased him even more. Fortuitous, what does it mean? When two people with no plan for a meeting, no appointment, come together, maybe run into each other. Sounds like an accident. And that's what fortuitous means. Accidental. How do you know fortuitous means accidental? Because the writer has told you the meeting was not planned. What's the opposite of a planned meeting? An accidental meeting. The writer tells you he's not talking about A, but about the opposite of A. In the first example, Detective Kelly wasn't talking about blameless suspects, but about suspects worthy of blame, culpable ones. In the second, the writer was talking not about a planned meeting, but about an unplanned meeting, fortuitous. All right. One more example of this discovery of meaning by opposites. From childhood on, the two boys were entirely different. The older was self-centered, concerned only with his own interests. His brother was the altruist. What's that last word mean, altruist? One boy was selfish. The two were completely different. It must be the other boy was unselfish. And that's the answer. An altruist is concerned with other people, not just with himself. You know it because the writer told you what altruist is not. So far, you've looked at two ways to learn words in context, that is, in relation to other words in the sentence or paragraph. We've talked about the ways a writer can help you know what he means, but there's another way. You can dig out a meaning from a sentence by applying your own head, your own experience to the problem. After all, you weren't born yesterday. You've seen a few things in your life, and some more in newspapers, on the tube, and in the movies. You've been there. So if you saw this sentence, when you've overeaten at a big Thanksgiving dinner, you feel replete. You know what replete means. You've eaten some of those dinners, and you know how you feel. Stuffed, full, and that's what replete means. Try this one. Not even a letter from the president can do much to mitigate the grief of a gold star mother. You know that word mitigate? Maybe not, but you probably do know or can certainly imagine what a gold star mother, one who has lost a son in the war, feels, and what a letter from a president could do or not do. You probably guessed that the letter could not do very much to soften the mother's grief or make her grief any less. And you guessed that's what mitigate means. And you'd be right. It means soften or lessen. Sure, you've been around and you can guess what a word means, but you can guess wrong. Maybe because you haven't been given enough clues. Like this. She had nothing but the greatest enmity for him. No way you can guess what enmity means. If you don't already know, it means deep-seated hatred, but he probably does. Sometimes it's not the writer's lack of clues, but your own experience that leads you in the wrong direction, leads you to think the word means something the writer never intended. Look at this. The politician who knows which strings to pull and how hard can engage in rackets and gross crimes with impunity. Now, you know that this means a politician can commit all kinds of crimes and get away with it. That's nothing new. But you still don't know what impunity means. Once you get the hang of learning words in context, it can save a lot of time. The more you practice, the more words you'll know and the more time you'll save. But learning words in context doesn't always work, as you well know from this sentence. For all you know, impunity can mean confidence, protection, or contempt for the law. But which? To answer that one, you have to get the dictionary into the game. More than 500,000 words in this one, but 55,000 good ones in here. And one of them is impunity. There you go. Exemption from punishment or penalty. Looking at exemption, you know X is a prefix meaning out or out of something, and shun is a suffix for action or process of. But if you don't know the root, you should look up exemption. You'll find it means freedom of an obligation required of others. So, impunity adds up to no punishment for this politician. Here's an interesting one, calendar. Would you feel different about calendars if you knew the old Latin word calendarium was a moneylender's account book? Even then, time was money, it seems. Here, another one. Parasite. How would you feel about the fleas on your dog if you knew the word parasite was originally a Greek word meaning fellow guest? Move over, buddy. The point of this is that using the dictionary is sometimes the only way you can figure out some words. But you should use it wisely as a final resort. It takes time you could be saving if you tried to figure out the word in context first, or by breaking down the word into its roots, prefix, and suffix. You shouldn't rely on it every time you need the meaning of a word. That doesn't mean you should stay away from the dictionary. There's a lot of interesting information in here, hundreds of humorous tidbits and fascinating facts. You might try thumbing through the dictionary just for fun sometimes when you've got a spare moment and you want to relax. 2 for the price of 1. That's an efficient way to use the dictionary. It involves your learning synonyms. The real fun, the real interest when you learn synonyms is to learn at the same time the little ways in which the words are not exactly the same. The little extra shade of meaning one word has that another has not. For instance, President Roosevelt said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Would it work if you used some synonyms for fear? If you said fright itself, terror itself, alarm itself? I don't think so. Of course, the president was talking about a fear that was really gripping the United States at that time. The fear that our whole economy was down the drain. And our synonyms don't really work for that kind of fear. Fright is really more a word you use for a sudden scare, like when you see a mouse or a big spider. Terror is a word that describes your state of mind when you're really up against it. You're in a corner and here comes the big alligator with his mouth wide open. What about alarm? Alarm seems like it's for something a little further off than that alligator, something not quite so certain. Like if you suddenly start to gain weight or lose weight for reasons you can't explain. You feel alarm. You don't know exactly what you're afraid of. Okay, now, try a little synonym practice. There are 3 words: overt, dissent, eloquent. You should know them all, but if you don't know a word, you should look it up in the dictionary. Now, 3 more words: expressive, evident, disagree. Now, all you have to do is match them up. In the right-hand column, there is a synonym for every word in the left-hand column. Which goes with which? Well now, overt, what does it mean? It means out in the open. And of all the words in the right-hand column, the only one that could possibly be a synonym is evident. If the quarrel is overt, it's evident. What about dissent? What can it be but disagree? The only word left is eloquent. An eloquent person has the gift of gab, talks beautifully. Only one word at the right-hand column for that. Expressive is the answer. So there are 6 words you learned. And of course, if you felt like it, you could think of or find another synonym for each of these words, and then you'd have 9. How about obvious for overt, differ for dissent, fluent for eloquent? Okay, so much for synonyms. What's an antonym? An antonym is the opposite of a synonym. A synonym is a word that means the same as another word. An antonym is a word that means the opposite. For example, a synonym for terminate is end. An antonym for terminate is begin. A lot of antonyms are like that, practically automatic, like high and low, wide and narrow, thick and thin. But some antonyms are a little tougher. Take a word like wealthy. Synonyms for wealthy would be rich, affluent, well-to-do, opulent, flush. Antonyms would be poor, needy, indigent, penniless, hard up, destitute, impecunious, insolvent. Seems like there are more words for being poor than for rich. You shouldn't need more than 5 seconds to figure out why. Antonyms, like synonyms, are good vocabulary builders, but the first synonym or antonym you think of doesn't generally do much good. It's not a mind stretcher or a vocabulary builder. It's the second, third, fourth one that does something for you. Try to think of 5 synonyms for old, for instance. If you say aged, you haven't gone very far, but when you get around to ancient, venerable, antique, archaic, obsolete, you're building your vocabulary. The same with antonyms. Take a word like small. An antonym for small is large, which will get you nothing. But when you think of enormous, colossal, huge, massive, immense, and vast, words like these do build your vocabulary. And we've tried synonyms and antonyms. Now we come to homonyms. A homonym for a word is one that sounds the same but has a different meaning, sometimes also a different spelling. The word lean can mean lean on your elbow, or it can mean a lean piece of meat, or it can mean the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is not just quite straight. Those three leans are homonyms, but so is this. It's pronounced lean, the same as lean on your elbow, but its meaning is entirely different. It's a legal term that means the right to sell a debtor's property. So that's a homonym too. And thousands of words in the English language can have more than one meaning while they sound exactly the same, whether they're spelled the same or not, like these. Both pronounced principle, but PLE is a basic truth, and PAL is the head of a school. You can't really confuse the two in conversation. The important thing is to spell it right when you write it. Right and right are homonyms. And the main value in thinking about homonyms is to make sure you use the one you mean when you write it down. Here are a few more pairs of homonyms which are commonly confused. Principle and principle are the pair most often mixed up. Compliment with an I means saying something nice. If you say to your hostess, "That was a fine dinner," it's a compliment. Compliment with an E means completing something. So you might say, "The dessert was a perfect compliment to a perfect dinner." And that would also be a compliment with an I. By the way, these two words are not pronounced exactly alike. Affect, effect. Affect means changing something, as in tobacco affects your health or exercise affects your weight. Effect means accomplish something, bring it about, like tax reductions are designed to affect an improvement in the economy. This is a tricky one because capital with an A has a lot of different meanings. The capital is where the government is located, Washington, D.C. for the federal government, Sacramento for the capital of California. Or capital can mean capital A, a capital letter. Or capital can mean the money in a business. The simplest way to think about capital and capital is to remember that capital with an O can only mean a building. The Capitol is where the Congress convenes and adjourns. Let's look at some analogies. An analogy shows two things that are alike in some ways, different in others. For example, a sculptor makes a statue. A painter paints a picture. They are both making something, but the things they make are different. A cat has kittens, a cow has a calf. Both become mothers, but of different kinds of babies. So, if you made an analogy of this, you'd say a cat is to a kitten as a cow is to a calf. Or you'd say a sculptor is to a statue as a painter is to a picture. Okay? Now you try one. Now, I'll put a list of words underneath and you pick out the right pair to make the analogy. Boat is to water as automobile, exhaust, airplane, fuselage, air. What's the relation of a boat to the water? The water holds it up. And what in our list of words can hold up anything? Air. And what can air hold up? Not an automobile, not exhaust, just an airplane. So, boat is to water as airplane is to air. Try another one. A physician is to a patient. Teacher, university, client, parent, lawyer. The key to the problem is the relation between the first pair of words. In this case, physician and patient. A physician advises and helps his patient, right? Now, in our list, who could help and advise? A teacher or a parent or a lawyer? Okay, who could want advice or help in our list? A university? No. A client? Yes. And to make it perfect, a physician charges his patient and a lawyer charges his client. So the answer is, a physician is to a patient as a lawyer is to a client. One more. And remember, think about the first two words. Peninsula is to continent as lake, mountain, ocean, bay, isthmus. A peninsula is a little piece of land that sticks out of a continent, right? Well, a lake could have something sticking out of it. A mountain? No. An ocean? Yes. An isthmus is just a strip of land. So it looks like bay. But is it a bay in a lake or an ocean? An ocean sounds bigger, more like a continent. And besides, you wouldn't say a bay in a lake. It would be just an inlet. So peninsula is to continent as bay is to ocean. Analogies is a word game you can play for fun, but you're also playing it for money if you ever take a civil service or employment exam. Both use analogy questions, so it pays to know these word games. Crossword puzzles are word games too. Many people do them to improve their vocabularies, and that's a good way too. You can find crossword puzzles that are very easy, pretty hard, and all degrees in between, in the daily newspapers, in libraries, and bookstores. But of course, all these games and all this vocabulary building would be impossible without our old friend, the dictionary.